I have to tell you what's been on my mind this week because I feel that this is a topic that needs our attention more than ever. I think that we've gotten so used to reacting instantly that we rarely sit with complexity anymore. Everything feels polarized now. Every disagreement is becoming a divide, and every conversation is us versus them. And people stop being people and start becoming symbols, narratives, and categories. And I think we're losing the ability to let human beings be complicated, to let someone be wrong about something without deciding that they're entirely bad, to disagree without dehumanizing each other. And I think that part of it is we're consuming so much outrage, so much darkness, so much doom, that eventually it starts to feel like that's all there is. When all we consume is humanity at its worst, eventually we stop expecting anything else from each other. And that changes us. It changes how we speak to each other, how we see each other, and how quickly we assume the worst in people. And understanding nuance is not the same as abandoning accountability. You can hold people responsible for harm without reducing them into one-dimensional caricatures. You can disagree with someone without deciding that they no longer deserve humanity. There is no us versus them. There is us and us. And if we want to light this world up again, the answer cannot be setting each other on fire. Because if we lose each other's humanity, what exactly are we fighting to save? Hey loves! Welcome back to Amy's View Unscripted. I'm Amy. This is Life in Motion, where we grow with intention, connect with purpose, and move the whole world forward by becoming who we're meant to be. And today, I want to talk about nuance, or maybe more accurately, the loss of it. Because I don't think this is just an internet issue anymore. I don't think this is just politics or media or social platforms or discourse. I think this is starting to shape the way human beings fundamentally relate to each other. And I think a lot of people are tired. Not just tired physically, but emotionally tired. Spiritually tired. Tired of feeling like every conversation is a battlefield. Tired of feeling like every disagreement has to escalate into total condemnation. Tired of watching people become more and more reactionary while becoming less and less reflective. Now, I don't say that from a place of superiority, because we are all vulnerable to it. Human beings were not built to consume nonstop outrage all day, every day. We were not built to process the entire world's pain, conflict, stupidity, cruelty, injustice, anger, fear, and chaos in real time 24 hours a day. And yet, that's exactly what many of us are doing. We wake up and immediately start consuming emotional intensity. Arguments, tragedies, rage bait, fear, division, doom scrolling, public shaming, constant exposure to humanity at its loudest, cruelest, and most reactive moments. And over time, I think something starts happening psychologically. When all we consume is humanity at its worst, eventually we stop expecting anything more from each other. And that thought genuinely makes me sad. Because I don't think that most people are evil. I think that most people are just overwhelmed. I think that most people are emotionally flooded. I think most people are scared, exhausted, overexposed, overstimulated, underconnected, and trying to find certainty in a world that feels increasingly unstable. But when people are overwhelmed, nuance is usually one of the first things to disappear. Because nuance requires space. It requires thoughtfulness, reflection, emotional regulation, curiosity, humility, and the willingness to sit in discomfort long enough to recognize that reality is often more complicated than our first emotional reaction to it. And that is hard to do when everything around us rewards immediacy, immediate opinions, immediate certainty, immediate outrage. The pressure to instantly pick a side before we've even fully processed what we're even looking at. And once that happens, people stop being human beings and start being abstractions, categories, labels, narratives. We flatten each other. Someone says one thing, and then suddenly they're reduced to that one thing. Someone makes a mistake, and now that mistake becomes their whole identity forever. Someone disagrees with us, and instead of seeing a human being with lived experiences, fears, contradictions, blind spots, complexity, suddenly we see the other side. And I think we need to be very careful about where that leads. Because once human beings stop seeing each other as humans, history gets very dark, very quickly. Now, I want to be extremely clear about something because I know this conversation can make people nervous. Understanding nuance is not the same as abandoning accountability. Those are not the same thing. Allowing complexity in people does not mean excusing harm. It does not mean pretending actions don't matter. It does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. It does not mean there shouldn't be consequences for harmful behavior. What it means is refusing to believe that one thing suddenly becomes the totality of who a human being is. It means understanding that accountability and humanity can exist at the same time. And sometimes I think we've started losing the ability to hold two truths at once. That someone can be hurt and still be responsible for hurting others. That someone can do good in one area of life and still fail badly in another. That someone can be deeply flawed without becoming irredeemably monstrous. That someone can be wrong without becoming subhuman. And I think that when we lose the ability to hold these tensions, we lose something deeply important about being human ourselves. Because human beings are complicated. We are contradictory. We are emotional. We are imperfect. And we are constantly evolving. And thank God for that, honestly. Because if human beings were only the worst thing they had ever done, most of us would be doomed. I think about this a lot lately. How quickly people assume bad intent now. How quickly conversations escalate. How normalized cruelty has become in the name of righteousness. And listen, I understand anger. Some anger is justified. Some outrage comes from very real pain. Some systems absolutely deserve critique. Some behaviors absolutely deserve accountability. But I think there's a difference between fighting for something and becoming consumed by hatred in the process. And that line matters. Because eventually, if we aren't careful, outrage stops being a response and starts becoming an identity. And once that happens, compassion starts feeling like weakness. Curiosity starts feeling suspicious. Nuance starts feeling dangerous. And humanity starts feeling optional. And I don't think that's healthy for us psychologically, emotionally, culturally, or spiritually even. I really don't. I think some of us have been sitting in echo chambers of rage and dread and darkness for so long that we've forgotten what balance even feels like. Not because the world is perfect. It is not. But because endless exposure to conflict distorts perception. If every day all you consume is betrayal, stupidity, violence, corruption, cruelty, division, and outrage, eventually your nervous system starts preparing for that everywhere. You stop expecting goodness. You stop expecting grace. And you stop expecting sincerity. You begin interpreting everything through suspicion first. And I don't think human beings are meant to live like that. Now, I do want to be careful here, because I don't think this is about blame. Human beings are deeply affected by what we repeatedly surround ourselves with. That's real. If all we consume is fear, outrage, division, cruelty, and conflict, eventually it starts shaping how we see the world and how we see each other. But that also means that we have more agency than we think we do. We can choose what we feed our minds. We can choose how we engage. We can choose to step outside the constant cycle long enough to reconnect with reality again. Not algorithmic reality, human reality. Nature, community, conversation, art, laughter, imperfection, and the people directly in front of us. I think some of us need to step outside the endless cycle of outrage long enough to remember what real human connection actually feels like. Because despite everything, I still believe most people want love. Most people want meaning. Most people want safety. Most people want to feel seen. And most people want belonging. And maybe we'd remember that more often if we stopped reducing each other to caricatures long enough to actually listen again. Not blindly, not naively, and not without discernment, but humanly. And I know some people hear conversations like this and immediately worry that nuance means weakness, that compassion means passivity, that refusing to dehumanize people means failing to take harm seriously. I don't believe that at all. In fact, I think the strongest thing that we can do right now is to resist the pressure to become emotionally flattened versions of ourselves. To resist becoming people who can only think in binaries: good or evil, right or wrong, us or them. Because life is more complicated than that. People are more complicated than that. And if we lose the ability to recognize complexity in each other, eventually we stop recognizing it in ourselves too. That's part of why I've been talking so much lately about overwhelm, about emotional boundaries, about intentional energy, about not carrying everything we touch. Once we lose that ability to recognize our own complexity, reaction becomes easier than understanding. Condemnation becomes easier than conversation. And humanity becomes harder to access. But I still believe that we can choose differently. I believe we can slow down enough to think before reacting. I still believe we can hold accountability and humanity at the same time. I still believe that we can care deeply without consuming each other alive in the process. And maybe that starts smaller than we think. Maybe it starts in conversations. Maybe it's in how we speak to people. In resisting the urge to instantly dehumanize someone we disagree with. In remembering that there is a nervous system and a life and a history behind every face we encounter. There is no us versus them. There is us and us. And if we want to light this world up again, the answer cannot be setting each other on fire. Because if we lose each other's humanity, what exactly are we fighting to save? I don't think the answer is becoming colder. I think the answer is learning how to see each other clearly again. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd really encourage you to share it. I genuinely think this is something that a lot of people may be feeling right now, even if they haven't fully put words to it yet. And if you want to keep having conversations like this with me, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't have to wonder when we're having our next conversation. Take care of each other out there. And maybe this week, try to remember each other's humanity a little more.